The following program discusses sensitive issues related to addictive behavior. Parents are cautioned that some material may be too candid for younger children.
I'd like to introduce you to some friends of mine today. They have been through the very worst in a relationship and struggled with all that means and the very best. It's an absolute incredible story. So welcome to Celebrating Life and Recovery with Cheri. I'm your host, and today I pray this changes your life, your relationship. Come and join us on the cafe. It's an amazing story. I love going from week to week and bringing different topics. This topic we're talking about today, and we've talked about before, is marriage and how do we get real enough? You know, like I got married and I thought I was going to be all that. I was going to be the best wife. I was going to really, I was just going to wow Brad with everything that I brought to the table. And then he started acting out a few times. I'm like, who is this guy? He does not deserve a wife like me. You know, because we're so arrogant with that and we're so damaged, and we all come at relationships in different way. And I remember God one time had me look at Brad, and I was thinking anything but I want to be a good wife at this point, and had me look at him, and he said, what if underneath all that, this is an Abraham or Isaac, and this is Moses, and he just doesn't know it, and he's got to see it in your eyes. And I'm thinking, in my eyes, I want to look in the mirror and say, I don't think he's seeing any of that. And God said, I want you to repent, and I want you to look at him differently. I want you to be different towards him. And I had no idea what that meant. And so we're going to talk to some friends of mine today that I know have different stories but similar experiences with trying to figure out how to be real in a relationship. And I want to say, Richie and Timmy Brower, thank you for joining us again. We've had you on before. I have loved you since the first time I saw you in the community doing a teaching. And so when I talk about that moment when we decide to get real in a relationship and God confronts us about what we're thinking and what's going through our head, I want you to go there. But first, Timmy, who are you, and where did you come from long before you met him? You know, because we all come from somewhere.
Sure. No, I thought, similar to you, coming into marriage, that this is going to be wonderful and great, and had no concept that my past was going to have any impact on our new, exciting, and bright future that we were creating. I came from a pretty dysfunctional background, but thinking it was really normal. I mean, this is just how family life is. And my parents divorced when I was 5. And my mom and I moved to Hawaii from the West Coast, and I started traveling from Hawaii back to Seattle to visit my dad every summer by myself when I was 5, because that's just normal. Right. And you know, you make friends on the airplane and all that. And what we didn't, I mean, both of my parents got remarried really quickly. And so the first time I came back to my dad's, life was different. We were a farming family, and the family that had just splintered had become a new family. He had remarried. There were now 4 kids and another one on the way, and I was plunked right down into the middle. And it was kind of one of those scenarios where there is a lot more kids than there is care available. And
even with you coming back, you know, looking for whatever that image of you and being daddy's girl and all that kind of stuff, you're looking to move right back into that, and that spot's not there anymore.
No, that spot was kind of blown up. And, you know, and I can say for my, you know, then new stepmother, I think she had a really, really rough row to hoe. She was very isolated out in the middle of nowhere, with a whole passel of kids, and now one more that wasn't hers, and it was a recipe for disaster. The food was not always where it needed to be, like on the table. We just didn't have a lot, and it wasn't because necessarily we were poor. It was just no one was looking out for those kind of things, and there was very little adult supervision, and so we got into a fair bit of mischief, I think you could use the word. And
when you talk about mischief, and I don't know if it's the same in your household that it was in ours, but sometimes we could be really cruel with each other.
yes, that kind of mischief.
Because sometimes when you hear that word, you're thinking, oh, they played, or they threw rocks into a lake, or they broke a window. But it's like that when you get dysfunction and you get kids that are unsupervised, they can really terrorize each other.
Yeah, and there was some domestic violence involved too from the parental standpoint, and so we were acting out the pain that we were all experiencing of, you know, we clashed, we didn't get along. I came in, I think, kind of princess-like, you know.
And everybody's a threat to everybody else getting attention.
Exactly, and so it was just, we were all pitted against each other. And we had moments where we really got along, but they were few and far between.
Yeah.
And so I was kind of living a double life of my summer life, where everything was chaotic and bad, and then my
laying out on the beach.
Clearly, yes.
In Hawaii.
Right.
I'm so jealous. I'm thinking I could see those two worlds, really different worlds.
Yes, they were. And I did like my Hawaii life, so
Yeah.
don't get me wrong. I lived in Hawaii twice, and it's a good thing to live near water and beaches. But it really created, in my head, a very easy way to compartmentalize of, you know, you act like everything is good, even when it's not.
Right.
And that kind of became, I would say, a theme for a good portion of my life that I'm still repenting of periodically. Because I didn't know that having a double life wasn't normal.
Right.
And so when we got married, I thought having a double life was still normal.
So what's really interesting to me is that you ended up doing that double life, went to school, in college. I know that you guys met at a
summer camp.
Summer camp.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but you could do that very well. You could adapt really well. You could disassociate really well. You can turn around on a dime and smile, everything's fine.
You bet.
Really well.
And be pretty proud of it, too.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't even just, oh, I do it. It's like, oh, no, I did it, and I did it well. And there's
Yeah.
a level of arrogance that I could be that slick.
Yeah. But I guess the reason I'm kind of slowing down in the story right here, because I have so many people that I love, and when I first meet them, I can see that. And I'm thinking, I hope that God gets you to repent of that, to walk away from that. Because you could see underneath all of that stuff, those masks, that this is an incredible person. But we don't know that.
Right.
You know, and so you're saying even meeting him, I could wear that mask easy.
Mm-hmm. And I wouldn't say it was something I did usually intentionally. It was like, oh, I'm going to put on my happy face. It was just, you know, when it's the lifestyle that you come from, you know, you don't notice it really when you switch to, you know, being, oh, I'm not happy, but you know, everything is falling apart, but I'm going to look like everything is pristine. And so it wasn't something I consciously, you know, set
Right.
out to manipulate or deceive, but I think those of us who grew up in a really dysfunctional home, that's something that we kind of wear a second skin without even realizing it, and then when we get into relationships, it causes difficulty.
So you guys meet. You're going to fall in love. You're going to do it all right.
Yeah.
Of course,
Right?
because we're good like that.
I love that because it's just who we
Right.
are.
That's
So
right.
well, you're working for the Lord, so do you
Yeah.
have any other choice?
Yeah.
I mean, than to have your happily ever after? So we got married, and what we didn't know is that the past comes back to get you. And I have a background that includes incest and child abuse in amongst all of that. And you know, you would like to think that sexual abuse just goes away because you're out of the situation.
Right.
And oh, if only that were true, but it's not. And so I brought that in to our marriage, not even realizing it, because I didn't have, we got engaged when I was 20 and married right after I turned 21. And I was still in school.
Right.
Richie was recently out of seminary, we were pastoring already. And we didn't have the language to be able to wrap around, uh-oh, now what?
Right. Because I know a little bit about your journey, and you decided not to, you know, some people really do decide I want to do it right, and we're not going to have sex, and we're not going to fool around, and we're not going to push those boundaries before marriage. So
Right.
you did all of that.
We did. We were super careful, and I'd like to say all of that was for very chaste and moral reasons. Those were there too, but I think that looking back, I think that there was a part of me that was really, really afraid to even open Pandora's box.
Right.
And so if we don't play there, then I don't have to worry about it. Again, not a conscious decision, but so I was really, really comfortable having very little physical relationship because it felt safer. But then we got married, and all of a sudden, Pandora's box is right there and accessible, and it opened with force, I would say, on our honeymoon.
So let me just say, because that's intense, but did you know some of her background stuff before you married? Did you know about the abuse? Did you know about...
No, there were some indicators before we were married, but I don't think either of us connected the dots before we were married to say, oh, this means this. It was like, what's that about? And we knew that there were some things that were messed up, you know, in her family, like there's things messed up in mine. And we just kind of thought, that must be, you know. Love
will make it all go away.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
And you know, there's some truth of that, but we've got to do the work.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah.
So you get married, honeymoon, you said, all of a sudden everything now by force. What do you mean by that?
Means that we didn't know that, we just didn't know what we didn't know. And so, you know, we found physical intimacy to be incredibly challenging. You know, it doesn't happen like the movies, boy, howdy. And that's even, I think that's true just from an inexperienced standpoint, let alone when you add trauma to it. And so, you know, when sex didn't work on our honeymoon, it started a cycle for us of Richie feeling rejected and abandoned. And so, you know, his response to that was to get angry. And in the face of anger,
an abused kid, right?
Yeah, I ran away emotionally. And so, but then that made him feel more abandoned because I just rejected and left him. And so then he would, you know, emotionally pursue. And then I would keep backing up until the cougar hit the corner. And then I would come out with force because I do have a lot of words and I did use them.
And even saying that when someone says, for you, Richie, I'm sure, is that you are going to stay here and we're going to work through this and you're going to hear me. And you see in her eyes, she's already gone. It is the craziest thing for a couple to want to scream at each other like, this shouldn't be happening like this. Right. I love you, you love me, we can work this out, but we're saying it in anger and in fear, and nobody hears anybody.
Right, well, and were you going to say something?
I was just going to say that, you know, part of what has been so challenging is that everything that that I knew or thought would be an expression of love because of her background and her story was not love. It didn't feel like love. It wasn't received as love. And so, you know, it just created this place where I'm dealing with my own feelings of rejection and abandonment touching my story, and I'm trying to figure out how to love her in her story, but I don't understand her story, and everything I try comes off wrong, and it's just this incredible, hopeless mess.
It is incredible. I remember in the first time that I felt Brad's breath on my neck. And all of a sudden it triggered all of my abuse. And he was just leaning over to kiss me and just say, you know what, I just love you. And I was repulsed. And both of us knew at that moment we're in trouble, and none of us had words. And so that's what you're saying. It was that real. It was not what he was saying. It was not what he was doing until the anger came in. But it was like all of this stuff is triggered.
Yeah, no, Richie was being tender. He was being thoughtful. He was, I mean, we were both inexperienced, but I mean, but just entering into that arena, which I had so purposefully chosen to stay out of, and again, unconsciously, so I didn't know that the freight train was coming. And so that really set us up for years of that cycle of Richie feeling rejected and then abandoned and then angry and then me retreating, and we just did it back and forth, and that became our crazy cycle of what we do when we don't know how to do better.
And when you say crazy cycle, because I know that at the same time being in ministry, you're still going to the church and doing those gigs, you're still ministering, all of that kind of stuff is still happening, and yet inside this is like a storm that won't go away.
You bet.
Right.
Well, and what's sad, I think, is sometimes in the church we have this idea that if you're a good Christian, that none of that stuff will happen. It won't be there. God will just take it all away.
Right.
And so that I don't know if anyone intentionally taught me that. That's just kind of what I picked up,
Right.
living in churchy environments.
All I have to do is better devotions,
Right.
pray more, have more
Right,
faith.
exactly. If I do those things, my problems will magically disappear. We'll love each other well, and we'll go out and save the world for Jesus.
Right.
And we didn't.
Did I tell you I love you? Even when you say that kind of stuff, I feel I just love you, because I know that you don't believe that now, but at that time, everything in you believed that.
You bet, and that's where early programming of, oh, okay, I don't know how to deal with the chaos that is true, so I will just put on my ministry face and we will go and act like everything is very pristine, when in reality, we are falling apart, and this is, we've been married for 3 weeks, and I go back to school, and everyone's like, oh, yay, this is good. I mean, I was a theology major.
How was your honeymoon?
It was great. No, but of course you don't say that. And
To anybody.
To anybody at all. And so that, like I said, we just had years of really committing to do better, but not having the tools to know how. We had no idea how to make a transition, because between where Richie came from, which was a lot of chaos as well, and where I came from, we both had a lot of dysfunctional habits that we didn't know weren't right. We believed a lot of lies, because how can you can't come out unscathed. This idea of resilient children is both completely true and not, because resiliency suggests that you're going to go back to the original state. It doesn't happen.
Because there wasn't an original state.
Right.
There wasn't something that was
Exactly.
healthy.
And it even changes your DNA and your biology. I've been reading about neuroscience lately, and it's really amazing. But, you can't go back to the original state. So you bring all of that with you, both habitually as well as the what you saw modeled, and then you bring it into marriage and go, yay, let's do a good job.
But
we don't know
and I know that both of you know this, but I want to say this out loud, because we start to even say, okay, I get it, we just need to talk to each other, but we're talking to each other through our dysfunction.
Right.
So you're not hearing a thing she's saying, you're not hearing a thing he says, and everybody is triggered even more by that honest wanting to dialogue.
Right.
So it really is, when we talk about we have an enemy that is very strategic in saying, you know what, you think you're going to be one flesh? Hello. So we have an enemy that says, it's going to be like you're talking 2 different languages.
Yeah.
And I love what you guys say, because you say, and for years we were in that vortex.
Yep.
Well, and like I said, we wanted to do better, but we didn't know how. I mean, like when you talk about the communication thing, it was so bad when we first got married. Again, things you don't know aren't normal. I have a radio in my head, and when conflict starts to rise, so does the volume of the radio in my head. I can hear full symphonies, full orchestras, and his voice would just go away.
So you dissociate really well.
I'm a pro. Learning to repent of that too.
Yeah.
But so we would come to the end of a conversation that had been highly conflictual, and he'd be like, "Do you get it?" And I'd be like, "Oh, I'm in trouble, because I have no idea what we just talked about."
Yeah.
I went to my calm place, which again I learned really early. That's a safe place to be. Chaos can go, but if you go into the calm place in your head, you're going to be okay.
And I'm looking at you, Richie, knowing that you spent your life alone, wanting to connect, and feeling like you're not good enough. I'll never be good enough. So when she disappears, you're alone.
Yeah, and it just felt like, well, when we tell our story, I talk about how when I met her, I felt the aloneness begin to leave, and I thought, oh, I could never be alone again. That could not be my reality. And then we got married, and I found myself right next to her, but completely alone. And it wasn't just me. She was alone too. And the amazing thing was, we were great actors. So while all of this was going on, I remember we went to some meetings one day, and a good friend of ours saw us come through the doors of this meeting, and he comes and he has his hand, and he says, oh, you two are just the perfect couple. You're just the perfect couple. And we'd just been fighting in the car.
Yeah.
And we weren't, you know, as Timmy said, you don't know what you don't know. We weren't trying to act. We just were good actors, and we were playing the part.
And you've learned it your whole life, your whole life.
Yep.
The whole life set you up for this role.
Yep.
Yep.
But this role kills us.
Yes.
So you are alone. You're feeling hopeless. You're trying to do this by yourself. You're working harder, probably doing more jobs, setting up more ministry things because I don't know what to do here.
Yep.
So what happens?
Well, we start church planting because that's a very peaceful.
That's exactly what you should do next.
That's exactly what we should do next. And it was completely providential what God did. It started out with a negative conversation, which unfortunately much impetus can come from negative conversations. But Richie's like, you just need to get a job, okay? I was in school. He's like, you need to get a job. I'm like, fine, I'll get a job then.
Yeah.
And with that attitude and head bobble, and so I found a job at a homeless shelter for women and children, non-denominational. And I was going to go save a different world because this world wasn't working.
Right.
And I got there and didn't know that I had real issues with women. I didn't know that. And now I'm working in an environment where literally there's roughly 60 women. And
so
that's
I have
all.
to say, just for women, Timmy, because a lot of people don't touch on this, is when we are damaged and families that break up and divorces and all that kind of stuff, I don't think we realize all of those women issues and mother issues and that disconnect. And God is saying, you're surrendering yourself to me, and I have to go to all of those places and get you to trust me to open that up. And so for him to set you up where you are surrounded by women, that is, I just am proud of God. I want to kiss him all over the face. I want to say, how do you do that? It's not a forced healing,
no.
But he says, you're asking for healing, and I'm going to have to take you through some painful places.
You bet. And he put such beautiful, amazing women in my face, in my face. And I mean, literally, you know, ones who would say, honey, let me just pray for you, and would go like this, and they'd want to hold my hands.
Yeah. It's like, well, I'm good.
Yeah, I'm great, thanks. You can pray on your side of the room. And of course I didn't, I'm like, oh, of course.
Yeah.
But inside I'm going, yeah.
I don't know how to be touched. I don't know how to open up that way.
Well, certainly not like that.
Yeah.
I mean, this whole mixing spiritual relationships and real life thing, I'd never tried that before.
Yeah.
And it was messing with my facade, because if my facade is pristine, and then now you're trying to enter past that, what does that do? And that created, I would say, more chaos at home, because it disrupted me and I didn't know what to do. And so, you know, I came home more disrupted, and that did not help our relationship.
Yeah. There was so much pressure with, you know, what was going on in her story, and then our church plant was harder than I'd thought. We'd kind of been the golden children, so everything we touched had turned to gold, and this project
was not.
It was hard work, and it was not taking off like a rocket ship. And so everything was just pressure cooker and crushing us both in our own areas of brokenness and woundedness. And we had no idea that's what was going on, but that's what was happening.
That was happening. And it's really interesting when God starts to allow you to get touched by someone, and then you feel a little taste of what intimacy would be like, and now you want it in your home.
Yeah. But we didn't have that, and I wouldn't even say that, we didn't know the depths of what we didn't have, because our templates were so broken. You know, we sometimes make the joke, sometimes, those red flags that come up, they've been broken off at the bottom, so they can wag as much as they want. You're never going to see them because they're not there anymore. And so, we found ourselves working really hard. And really trying to love well. I mean, I can say we had no tools, but we were determined. And I think if I were to say if there was anything that God infused into us during that season, it was just perseverance. Because we tried everything. We read so many books. We were so determined. I think I can truthfully say we turned over every stone trying to figure out, is there a better way, or is this really all there is to hope for? So,
and so what you were saying is that men, we have to heal. It has to be real.
Yeah.
And I love, you know, because Richie, we talked to you on another program, and you talked about you eventually grabbed some mentors, did all that kind of stuff. These women were life-changing, and so God really starts to change things. But you said something at one point about contempt and anger and those kind of things, because those are some real big things, bitterness, where all of a sudden I'm looking at you and I hate the fact that I have to confront all this and it's your fault. Because we tend in relationships to really blame each other. You're crazy, you brought all this stuff. And so how do you get past that stage? Because I know you're not there now.
It's true, we're not.
You know, it looked different for both of us. Like for me, for a lot of our marriage, we just kind of, we agreed that Timmy was really the issue, right? Because of her past and stuff. And there was really very little light on my story for first 8.5 years of our marriage. And so I don't know if I would, I've been thinking about this word contempt. Is that how I felt? But I definitely was very comfortable and happy to believe that it was all her issue, right?
Because this wasn't something, and we're going to break and then come back, but this wasn't something that you pretended to believe. It wasn't that you were in denial and hiding this from her, that you literally felt this was your issue.
Oh, yeah.
If you got your stuff together, we would be okay. So we're going to take a break, and I want to say for any couple out there that is saying right now, me too, that's us, you know, that kind of thing, is that it is amazing when we can break denial and say, God, can you fix this? And if you shut your eyes right now and just say, God, can you fix this? You will hear the sweetest yes you've ever heard. And so we'll be right back, because I want to let you see the rest of the journey and what God himself could do in a relationship. It is absolutely amazing. Be right back.
The following program discusses sensitive issues related to addictive behavior. Parents are cautioned that some material may be too candid for younger children.
Welcome back. You were talking about marriage, and we're talking about healing, and you know, a lot of us I know that I came from such a really wounded, dark place, and I step into a relationship, and we believe if I can only love or be loved, all of that goes away. And you guys have been talking about that today. It's just that, and that was your belief, is that once I fall in love, once I have a partner, even Richie, when you said that a little while ago, everything in you said, I will never be alone again.
Right.
Everything changes.
Yeah.
And what you found out is that's not true. All of this stuff just come up to the surface.
Yep. It's like it started all over again. And you know, the story didn't stay there, fortunately. We wouldn't be here talking today, but I was such a blind contributor, cheerfully blind, I would say, willingly blind, that...
Wanting to be blind.
Oh yeah, because it was much easier for me to see the fault in her and none in me. And that played out in some pretty ugly, unfortunate ways. I remember specifically one time as Timmy was starting to meet with her mentors and starting to get a new vision of what a healthy relationship looked like, and she's starting to say things like, you know, this can't all be me. And I remember looking at her, and my response, out of my chosen blindness and my 0 compassion score, all those combining, my response was to her to say, you know, I can see how it'd be really difficult for you to accept the responsibility for the chaos of our marriage after all these years. I can see how that would be hard for you to carry that, and why you'd want to transfer some of that blame to me.
Notice the compassion on his face right now.
But even when you say that, because you know, but what you were saying, as a man of God, I want to enlighten you.
Yeah,
this is you.
Yes, honey. Let me tell you how it is. God and I have got this figured out, and
it's you.
This is still you.
This is your problem.
Yeah.
So as he's speaking, you know in your heart of hearts, this is not true anymore. You're having hope for the first time. Maybe it is not about only me, and maybe we can actually work this out. But somebody does that, and what is the first feeling that you have? What do you want to say? And don't lie to me.
I will not lie to you.
All right.
Well, I would say, I mean, truly, as he's saying this, there was confusion rising. So I'm like, wait a minute. And there was, I mean, I was starting to speak back in ways, I had to learn to be respectful, you know, tactful occasionally, but there was, I guess, a inner fortitude that was rising of,
This is not all me.
This isn't all me, and I'm not going to act like I'm okay with it being that it is. And I think I started getting angry. Up till that point, I would say Richie had been angrier, but that started a season of me being more angry too, because like, no, I'm not going to take this anymore, actually.
And I have to say, because a lot of times people will say, I've had people that have come over my house and we've just spent a week together just kind of processing some of this stuff. But I have people that come over and they say, well, if I get angry, is that rebellion? And it really isn't. It's like being able to say that for the first time in your life, somebody needs to be angry for this child and confront those lies and say, not anymore. And that is kind of a seed of healing, even though it doesn't sound like it at the time.
Yeah. Or feel like it.
It doesn't feel like it, especially to you.
That's right.
You're like, what happened to my sweet little wife, and why are you saying this to me?
Yeah, she's talking back to me all of a sudden.
Because
I'm the spiritual leader of the house.
That never happened before. I think something that we've learned even recently about anger, though, is that anger is a God-given emotion for the purpose of righting wrongs. It's about injustice. Where it gets confused and mixed up is when it rises in me because I'm feeling that an injustice is being done to me, but that's not necessarily what's true. And the lies I'm believing are wrapped up in that. That's where anger gets really destructive. You know, but anger for the purpose of justice is, I mean, that's what Jesus did in the temple. This is an injustice of what they were doing to his Father's house. And that's why his anger wasn't sin. But ours is not usually
quite as righteous.
It's not righteous. And I think that, you know, for us, I know for me, a lot of, well, I'd say for both of us, the anger that came up was very self-protective, you know, very, I'm not going to be stepped on anymore kind of an attitude. And that, while maybe better than the alternative, maybe not, it's still not the, I would say,
like
more godly path.
Silence.
It's still dysfunction. It's just a different side of maybe a similar coin. And so,
but for a lot of people, including yourself, it definitely is a stage not to be afraid of. You know, be careful. And in this stage, even as I'm listening to you guys, it's like it's really incredible to have God to journal to or go back to and say, because I remember there were times that I was so angry and I was so looking at Brad in his arrogance at times and his own issues at times and just journaling with God. And I would start out those journals horrible, like, no. And by the time he worked with me through the Holy Spirit, I was saying, okay, how can I be heard by him? So it really is, don't be afraid of it, but you've got to step into that stage. So you're right there. You're starting to look at the injustice. You're starting to say, hey, this is not all about me. Did he hear you at all?
Did you hear me at all?
No.
I knew that was going to be the answer. It's like, no, not at all.
No, total pushback from me. Just, and like I already said, you know, I can see why, you know, this would be a heavy burden for you to carry, the responsibility of what you're bringing to our marriage. That was really my posture for a couple of years.
But you are bringing the chaos into our house.
But because I wouldn't back down, it actually escalated the war in our home because I wouldn't just go, okay, fine, and go back to my corner anymore. I said, nope, it's not all me. And so then Richie's anger started getting higher too, and that found us in a pretty difficult position because we were both pretty angry.
All of this while we're both in full-time ministry. So all of this is our reality while we're putting on our happy face and I'm standing up to preach or she's going to serve women at the shelter.
What I want to say to both of you is I'm sorry that you didn't find enough people that you could just be honest with. I pray that's changing, that we start to be able to talk to each other. And I know that you found mentors. But I want to say, even to somebody that's breaking denial, and there are some incredible men that I know that had to go through exactly what you had to go through, is that as they're breaking denial and seeing all that kind of stuff, the anger does escalate because they want to control everything. They want to contain everything. If it's out of control, am I going to be left by myself again? What's going to happen? What are people going to think about me? What about my ministry? I mean, all of that kind of stuff, and we just try to fight to control. And what you are finding out in this crazy time is that didn't work.
No, it didn't.
So what worked? Because something eventually worked.
Well, I think, you know, what worked for me was, you know, we've talked previously about the mentors and starting to take my own journey and look at where's this anger coming from? And looking at my story and walking back into my story and connecting with that and saying, oh, that needs to be grieved. I mean, that's sad, and I need to take time to be sad and grieve these elements of my story that were tragic.
Right.
And as I've done that, and I'm not done.
So let me just go back, because somebody will say, and they've said it to me a number of times, is, Cheri, do I have to go back to my past and relive that stuff? And I want to say, your past, you're dragging that right now.
Yeah.
This is not your past. It's in every pocket.
That's right.
You know, it's destroying every relationship.
Yeah.
And so I don't think we ever have to go back to our past. But if we're dragging that anger with us every day, that fear, that loneliness, that contempt, all of that kind of stuff, God says, I can't even teach you about love.
That's right.
Because you have this stuff that you're dragging.
And there's amazing research, you know, brain research that talks about, like, our limbic system. It knows no past or future. Everything is present tense in our limbic system. So when we're triggered by something that happens relationally or trauma or whatever, it's all right now.
Yeah.
And the same thing, other research showing that our body remembers, our body carries memory. So none of it's past. It's all with us. And it comes out as physical maladies. It comes out in relational brokenness.
And even when you say that, when I said Brad's breath on my face and neck, all of a sudden I'm 3 years old and being molested, right? So when you say your body remembers, and God says, you know what, when you bring that stuff to me, I promise you, I will bring healing.
Yeah.
But give it the time and energy that it needs. You can't skip the work.
Nope.
Right.
No. So it's really connecting the dots in the storytelling and getting in touch with my own story, our stories, that for me, the anger began to come down. And part of that was definitely going to God in prayer, changing the way I prayed. For me,
The way you spoke to her?
yeah, I'd prayed for 8 years that God would change Timmy.
Fix it.
Right? And my mentor said, hey, why don't you pray that God will teach you to love her well? It was like a new idea. And again, another prayer that God's excited to answer. And so that's how the journey began to change in the anger for me, was beginning to connect with my story and say, oh, when she does this, it reminds me of when I was a little boy and this happened, and that's connecting there. And as I made those connections, the power started to come out of those stories and the anger started to come down.
And the lies start to change.
That's right.
We will be destroyed by the lies that we tell ourselves until we believe the truth, and then the lie is voided out.
Yep.
And so it's like, I think I love the fact that when you said, when I start looking at my own stuff, when I start to love her well, that whole paradigm shift, I'm shifting. And you start to feel that shift.
You bet.
It's not about you anymore. It's not your fault anymore.
Yeah, and I think part of that is choosing to be on each other's team, you know, because we can blindly trigger each other and just kind of be indifferent about it. Well, just stop it. Well, I can't just stop it, you know. And you know, for Richie, you know, he tells in our other show, he told a little bit of a story about his mom just leaving for long periods of time
After she threatened to kill herself.
Right, exactly. Well, there are times, maritally, I don't really want to be in his space, and so my desire is to just leave the house. Well, what's that going to trigger in him? And so, but then it's, how do we balance our needs? Because the reality is, I do need to get away from the space we just created. And he needs to know in his heart that I am not leaving him. And so, you know, we've had times where I will say, I need to leave. I will be gone for X amount of time or whatever, you know, but I'm not leaving you. I am where this is not a reenactment of your childhood. I am coming back, you know, and that kind of thing. And I think that's ways that we can be, when we start knowing each other's stories.
That's powerful.
It is, because I know his stories well enough to know that I never want to step into that space and cause that little boy pain. Now, not to the place of denial or enabling or any of those things, but I mean, there's ways I can go about things that don't have to include hurting him.
Right. Even when you're saying that, is being able to at one point say, can I care about that, what happened to you?
Yeah.
And then can we step into our relationship? So I can't change it, I can't pay for it, I'm not your mom. But I do care about that, and I love you saying that, because we cannot disconnect each other from the reality of our lives. But I can be aware of it.
Yep.
And something that I think that I learned that made a difference for her is, as we were starting to learn new tools, is I'd get angry. Things would happen, I still get angry from time to time. But I've learned.
Your default is.
Yeah. And I've learned, though, that if I get angry and leave and don't talk to her and then come back and act like nothing happened, that's destructive. But if I say, I'm feeling angry, I need to take a walk, I'll be back in 30 minutes and we'll pick this up. She knows I'm not leaving, I'm coming back, we have an appointment, I'm not going to sweep it under the rug. I can go talk to God and pray and complain about this woman he's given me and come back with him having spoken to my mind and say, usually you need to go listen to her or whatever, and we started at a whole different place. But that was a skill that began to take the energy out of the fights for me and for her, as that was the way I could minister.
And even when you saying that is that she's from a divorced home, everybody's gone their own ways, she goes from place to place and everybody acts like nothing happened.
Right.
So for you to act like in her own home, for this pattern to follow her, it's almost like both of you would just be screaming inside, I can't live out this pattern for the rest of my life. So when we decide to do the work, when we decide to love each other well, when we decide to get the tools and stay present and care about each other, it's almost like those wounds get to heal finally. Finally.
Well, it's kind of a rewiring of the building. You know, we've got this building that has been, you know, through both fault and no fault, been wired poorly, and now we bring it into marriage and it's sending up sparks all over the place. But, you know, when Richie says, I'm really feeling defensive and angry right now, and I will be back in half an hour. And the first time he did that, I'm going, what was that? Because I mean, that wasn't part of our dynamic. That's not part of our cycle. He goes, you know, frustrated out the door, and I'm left stewing in my own juices. And we come back and tiptoe around each other for a few days, and then, okay, enough time has gone by. We'll act like everything's good. So when he left, saying, I will come back. I want to re-engage this with you, but I'm not doing it productively. And then he did, and I could, you know, we as wives, we can sense the space our husbands are in, and for Richie there's usually a scowl right there if he's frustrated. And you know, he came back in that particular time and his face was calm. And he said, I don't think I've heard you yet. Would you please start?
Shut up. That is so sweet.
No, I was floored. I was like, wait a minute.
Is this a trick?
Exactly. Actually, that was part of my question. But you know, I could sense that it wasn't. He was legitimately asking, you know, can you tell me again? Because I didn't get it. And I'm like, yeah. And you know, when he came so humbly like that, it takes all the fire out of me. I don't feel the need to shoot him up because he's coming, you know, humbly and gently.
He actually wants to hear you.
He does. And I think that when we started doing that, that's one thing, you know, doing our own work, our story work, and then giving each other space, but with a timeline, so that we would come back. That was really helpful.
That's amazing. I want to get back to this, but I know we have some incredible people at the cafe that probably have some questions for you. So I want to say, man, what do you think? And can we start here with you, Christina? And do you have any comment or question that you have for our guest?
Absolutely. I come from a broken home too. My question for you guys are your determination to stay together is so strong. Do you believe that's because you came from broken homes, both of you? You don't want to repeat that pattern, so you're determined no matter what, you're going to stick this out and make it work?
That's a great question, Christina. I think we've asked ourselves sometimes, where did that come from? And I don't know that we know the whole answer. We made some commitments before we were married. We said we will never use the D word in our home. And I think we've pretty well stuck to that. But there have been times when sometimes me, sometimes Timmy, you know, we've gone, I don't know if I want to take anymore. And I think for me at least, that determination comes from a couple places. God keeps calling me back to right here's where you need to be for my growth. I need to stay in a relationship with this woman because that's who God picked to help me grow up spiritually. And the people that I have around me do not give me a pass. And so I personally am supported by men who will say, So what's your part in this again? And how are you going to love Timmy well through this? And that builds or buttresses my commitment when it may lag for me personally.
And I love when you say that, and Christina, I love the question, because there's a lot of times when we have to make those commitments with each other. I'm going to grow through my relationship with Brad, and I don't want to run. I don't want to run. He doesn't want to run. And so many times it would be easier to do that. It would be easier to just say, you know what, we made a mistake, and head out the door. But I really believe that there is a God above that says, you know what, I can actually get you through that. And I'm not talking about somebody that's in obvious abuse, being beat, you know, having that all that kind of craziness. Get yourself into a safe place. But I'm talking about most of us. God says, I can work with that. Yeah. You know, Myri, I know that you have a question.
I've been in a dating relationship for a little over a year, and I was wondering what advice you would have for someone in my situation. Me personally, I want to know for myself, but specifically on the issue of connection. I like the part in your story where you guys said you really connected a lot while you were dating. You would dream together and things like that, but then it kind of stopped, or when you got married. And I just want to know, like, how do you start that process when you're dating, and to know how to, you know, have it better when you're married, to connect?
Good question.
It's a good question. I think, you know, finding ways to play together is really important from a bonding standpoint. You know, we sometimes take that for granted, I think. You know, of course we're going to do things together, but, you know, really intentionally find ways that build your relationship that are just playful, because that will be something that'll help carry you. Even from a neurobiological standpoint, it releases oxytocin and other bonding chemicals. And as you go into marriage, when the times get hard and there's stress and adrenaline, having that platform or foundation of connection, chemically as well as actionally, really, really helpful. And then choosing as you get married, you know, remember how we used to do that? We liked that. We need to do that, even if you don't like each other so much at that moment, to choose to do it anyways, because it kind of brings some of that fun and connection into the hard times, because every relationship is going to hit hard times, period. And so to have tools already in place, especially if you're intentionally saying, we're building this tool, so if we ever get married someday, we will have it in our toolbox. I think that's a really important thing to help maintain connection for the long haul.
And really have people around you too. When you play, especially if you're dating, play as a group. Get some young adults or folks around you. And Brad and I, we do road biking, we play golf, we ski together, all of that kind of stuff. And I didn't realize this until I actually started to work with couples more and more, that part of, for men, they feel connected, definitely intimately when we're in that intimacy, but when they are playing, when you are doing sports. And I had to find out from Brad, we get a bike, and I'm thinking, how fun is this? We could ride and talk and whatever. And he's thinking, talk? We're doing, we're going from pole to pole to see how fast we can go. And we're going to try to do these. We did 100 miles around Lake Tahoe, and we want to do it in this amount of hours. And I'm thinking, we're going to talk. And every time I talk, he gets irritable. So even find out how your partner plays, because they're going to play different than you. So it's that communication is just such a big thing. Is who are you? Who am I? And every once in a while, when I make sure that we're doing, trying to get our fastest time, there are times that Brad will look at me and say, let's just ride and talk. And I'm like, look at you. I love you. But it is that learning to communicate.
Yeah, it is. You bet.
And I was thinking, too, that, if it's not natural for you already to have some of these big dream conversations, then do it unnaturally, but make a habit of sharing your dreams together. So you can write down, do you know, obviously some of these questions would be more appropriate in different phases of your relationship, say if you're engaged. But do you know what he thinks about a big family or a small family? How do you want spirituality to look like in your life? How do you want career and family to interface? Have these conversations about what life is about, what's important, and make that a habit that you carry on into marriage. And that keeps you dreaming forward about what life could be and this beautiful vision for life together, because that vision might carry you through some rougher spots when it's not like you were hoping it would look.
And you know, you talked earlier about, you know, there are times that red flags come up. Don't ignore those. If you get a red flag and that flag says, you know what, he wants to be single and living in, you know, this part of the world, and I want to have 3 kids and settled in this part of the world. That's a red flag, and you guys have to really process that. I loved when you guys talked about, you know what, the red flags, we just cut the top of that flag off, so we didn't even see them anymore.
You bet. And you know, there were red flags when we were dating, large ones actually.
Yeah.
And we actually didn't entirely ask the right people. We asked people who, when we said, you know, hey, should we get married? What do you think? You know, we had people speaking into our lives, but we didn't actually ask our friends who actually did life with us. And there was several times where people in our peer group, as opposed to older peers, you know, who were like, what are you guys thinking?
Run.
You are doing bad stuff to each other. You guys just clash like nobody's business. And we're like, oh, but when we make up, it's good. They're like, yeah, not the best pattern. Nah, what do you know? And we really, I know there was at least 2 friends, I dismissed them out of turn and said, you just don't know the beauty that we create when we're doing good, which was true. When we were doing good, we were doing really good. But when we were doing bad, we were just awful. And so...
painfully so.
Yeah, and I should have asked better questions of them and saying, so what do you see? What's it like? And actually taking in what they said instead of just dismissing them and saying, yeah, what do you know? And that was like the cutting off of the red flags. You know?
So I love what you're saying is that, you know, put a lot of people around you, get that input from them, and even saying that, man, I am so glad you guys didn't run from each other, because what you give now is very real and it's very intense. So, you know, we're kind of coming to the end of our time together, and so I want you to talk about what is the coolest thing, things that have happened in your life as you have been more respectful to each other, allowed healing to happen, dealt with anger and contempt and all those kind of things. What are some of the richness in your life because of it?
You know, one of the things that I think of, you know, several years into the turnaround, as we call it, I realized that, you know, my greatest desire was to have connection and intimacy and not be alone or rejected. And I realized that through all the work that we've been doing, there was such incredible connection, emotional, relational connection. And I thought, wow, this is, I mean, there was still challenges with physical intimacy, but I literally said, if it never got any better than this, I'm a happy guy because I feel so connected to you emotionally, and this is great stuff. That was a high day to realize, wow, something amazing is happening here.
And even for as you're speaking, I can see that little boy in you saying, you know, I'm not going to be alone. I'm actually going to feel what it feels like to be loved in this life. That's huge.
It's a miracle.
I think the other thing is realizing that we really fight for each other. I mean, we still fight each other too, because we're human.
And that's the truth.
It is the truth.
You know, it's on bad days, I just have to not be ashamed to even call you up as my friend and say, you know what, Brad and I are just at each other. Can you spend some time with us?
You bet.
I don't have to be ashamed of that anymore.
No. And but to realize that we're fighting for each other. Like, so there's been times where we are not seeing eye to eye, and instead of going, you are my enemy, going, no, we have an enemy, and he is not gonna win here.
Right.
You know, and to switch, and sometimes that only that one sentence is what's needed to switch things around and go, I don't like you, you are not my enemy. And then to switch that so that we know we're on each other's team.
We had a classic example of this just recently. You know, we've made a lifelong commitment to keep working on growing our marriage. So that means that we still have a counselor, and we work with her regularly.
So I'm going to stop and say let's come back to that, because we're going to come back for the close. I'd like you guys to join me. I think that what you're going to say right now is going to be so important for us to hear. So stay with us, and we'll be right back. And man, you do have an enemy, but it's not each other. I love that. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
The following program discusses sensitive issues related to addictive behavior. Parents are cautioned that some material may be too candid for younger children.
Welcome back. I am so proud of God all the time. I want to kiss him on the face. I wanted to scream that when I said I want to be well, I had no idea that you were going to give me my own self, my family, and my children in the process. And it sounds like in your life the same thing. And you said you're still seeing someone.
Yeah, we've made a commitment. We want to keep growing. So we hit a tough spot not too long ago, and our counselor said something that was really significant. When we hit a tough spot, I mean, we're in marriage ministry, right?
Right.
And so the devil comes in and says, "Oh, what are you doing? You guys don't."
What do you guys know?
And she just simply reframed the whole issue and said, "You know, you guys are in a really heavy growing phase right now." And I went, "Yeah, that's what we do. We hit growth phases, don't we?" And I think that, for me, that just changed everything. It's like, oh, this is hard. We're in a growth phase. Okay.
And even visually, when you want to say that, is that when you go out to prune a tree, a fruit tree that you want to bear more fruit, that pruning is never easy.
Right.
And so we think we're going to get it and we're going to be home free at that point. If we are not dealing with this on a daily basis, we will start believing lies again.
Yep.
So counseling has helped. Anything else, Timmy?
No, I think just what Richie said, you know, if our goal is oneness, biblical oneness, then we have to be committed to reevaluating how are we doing now on a pretty constant basis, because there's always going to be things that come in. And the reason it's important, you know, in Genesis 2, at the end of the chapter, Moses, you know, talks about being naked and unashamed, and that's what we're going for.
Right.
And, you know, I don't think any of us will arrive there completely, but that's still what we're working towards.
Amen.
And so to keep working, because I want our marriage to be characterized by naked and unashamed.
And I love that, because it's saying that most of us really have this illusion of what we see a relationship being. We have a picture in our head. And I think that there are times, and I know you guys know that, and I want to say thank you for being on the program and sharing so far, but I want to say to anybody watching, we have a picture in our mind of what is love, what is relationship, who am I in relationship, and that picture a lot of time was taken in our pain, was taken at a time that we had no idea. We were watching a movie about love, and God himself says, give me the picture, because I can't heal you with that picture, because that's not what love is. And so being able to say, am I brave enough? My knees are shaking, my hands are trembling, and I'm surrendering my very picture of love to God and asking him, what is it? What is it? Who am I? How are you going to put me in relationship when I'm afraid of my own shadow sometimes, depending on where you've come from? And God said, I promise you, I'm a great counselor. I'm a good accountability partner. I know who you are the day after resurrection, and I will bring you to a place of healing. It is absolutely the coolest thing. Don't be afraid to surrender to God. Don't be afraid to check yourself and really work through this stuff, and don't be afraid to love the person in front of you. Until next time, always remember that God is crazy about you. Me too. Don't be afraid. Turn it over.